CBS News anchor challenges Trump official with poll showing 78% of Americans want Iran war to end. Video. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz appeared on CBS's Face the Nation and was confronted by host Margaret Brennan with polling showing that 78% of Americans disapprove of the conflict involving Iran. CBS's Olivia Gotsis is reporting that senior members of Trump's national security team, including Secretary Rubio, remain doubtful Iran will comply with this deal's terms, Brennan said during Sunday's episode the CBS News program. The CIA director presented Trump with intelligence indicating inconsistencies with Iran's commitments. So even the president's own team doubts this is a win. How do you sell this to the public? Waltz paused and then responded, "Well, Margaret, I'll go back to other polling that shows that the American people absolutely agree with President Trump that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Of course, we all want lower gas prices. They are lower below $4 and falling with more work to do. They're cheaper than under the Biden administration. We'll remember just a few months ago when analysts were saying oil would be upwards of $150 to $200 a barrel. And it is not, it's now under $80, he added. Of course, everyone wants cheaper energy. But what President Trump is doing is striking that balance with also ensuring that a genocidal regime that none of us trust can never have a nuclear weapon, and that process is underway right now as we speak." Brennan was citing polling published by CBS Sunday that noted most Americans suspect Iran's nuclear program has not been permanently stopped and that many Americans believe Iran will not stop threatening its neighbors. Watch the exchange between Brennan and Waltz in the video above. That exchange on Face the Nation between Margaret Brennan and UN Ambassador Mike Waltz really underscores the friction we are seeing in the current administration's foreign policy messaging. To understand the gravity of this moment, we have to look past the talking points and examine the people on both sides of that desk, because their histories provide the vital context for why this conversation felt so tense and, frankly, so inevitable. Margaret Brennan is a seasoned heavyweight in the world of broadcast journalism. Born in Connecticut and a graduate of the University of Virginia, she built her reputation the hard way, spending years covering the complexities of global economics and finance before pivoting into the high-stakes world of Washington policy. Her career trajectory, from CNBC to Bloomberg and finally to the anchor chair at CBS News, has been defined by an unyielding, surgical precision. She isn't the type of host who enjoys the performative screaming matches we see on cable news. Instead, she operates with a quiet, persistent intensity. When she confronts an official with data, like that 78% figure regarding the conflict with Iran, she isn't just asking a question, she is forcing the guest to reconcile the administration's narrative with the public's reality. She is a legacy journalist in the truest sense, someone who respects the weight of the office but refuses to let a lack of transparency slide. On the other side of that desk sat Mike Waltz, a man whose entire career is the antithesis of the typical career politician. Born in Boynton Beach, Florida, and raised with a deep sense of duty, Waltz's path began in the U.S. Army, where he became a Green Beret. He served multiple combat tours in Afghanistan and the Middle East, earning 4 Bronze Stars. Before he was ever a politician or a UN ambassador, he was an operative in the trenches of the very conflicts he now discusses from a diplomatic podium. He served as a policy advisor in the Bush White House and later became a familiar face on television as a military analyst. When you look at his journey, from the Special Forces to the halls of Congress and now to the United Nations, you see a man who has always been comfortable in high-pressure environments. He was elected to represent Florida's 6th congressional district, and he quickly established himself as a staunch hawk on national security, especially when it comes to the Middle East and China. The friction here is palpable because it represents a clash of two very different modes of operation. For Brennan, the job is to hold a mirror up to the government and show them the American people's skepticism. For Waltz, the job is to bridge the gap between the chaotic reality of international diplomacy and the need to maintain public support for a complex, often unpopular strategy. It is a classic dance, but it feels different now because the stakes regarding Iran have become so deeply intertwined with domestic economic concerns. It is fascinating to look back at the trajectory of these figures before the current administration took hold. Waltz was a prominent voice of opposition during the previous years, consistently criticizing the withdrawal from Afghanistan and pushing for a more aggressive posture toward Iranian proxies. He has always been a man of the peace through strength school of thought. Now that he is inside the tent, tasked with defending the president's specific, nuanced, and often contradictory moves, we are seeing him evolve from a pure critic into a practitioner. It is a transition that has clearly tested his ability to pivot. When he deflected Brennan's question about the 78% disapproval rating by pointing toward gas prices, he was doing exactly what any seasoned political appointee does: he was changing the channel. But it's a risky gamble. In my view, when an official tries to trade a conversation about national security and nuclear proliferation for a conversation about the price of oil, they are betting that the public is more motivated by their wallets than by their principles. It is a cynical calculation, but it is one that has defined American political discourse for decades. This moment in the news is a perfect microcosm of where we stand in 2025. We are living in an era where the public's appetite for foreign intervention has hit a historic low, yet the geopolitical reality, according to the administration's own intelligence, remains precarious. What we are seeing with Waltz is the burden of the insider. He is no longer the analyst on the sidelines telling us what is wrong. He is the official in the hot seat telling us why the path forward, regardless of its popularity, is the only one available. Personally, I find this dynamic deeply concerning for the future of our discourse. When a journalist presents clear, evidence-based polling that suggests a massive disconnect between the government and the governed, and the response is a deflection to a separate, unrelated metric like energy costs, the democratic process suffers. It creates a vacuum of accountability. Brennan was doing her duty by keeping the focus on the intelligence reports that suggest even the president's internal team is skeptical of their own deals. That is the essence of a free press, digging into the cracks of the official narrative. What we are witnessing is the collision of a military veteran's rigid, strategic worldview with the fluid, often chaotic expectations of a public that is exhausted by long-term global commitments. Waltz is attempting to sell a policy of containment that is, by his own admission, a work in progress. But the public's 78% disapproval rating suggests that Americans aren't buying the "it's a work in progress" line anymore. They are tired of the uncertainty, tired of the threats, and, frankly, they are losing trust in the intelligence reports that seem to change with every new administration. In my view, the most telling part of that interview wasn't even the policy talk, it was the pause. That split second where Waltz had to decide whether to lean into the reality of the polling or double down on the administration's talking points. He chose the talking points. That is a choice that reflects the state of our current political climate, where winning the news cycle has become more important than acknowledging the genuine, deep-seated anxieties of the electorate. It shows that despite the vast expertise and the impressive resumes of the people running our foreign policy, the ability to actually listen to the pulse of the nation has been almost entirely lost in the pursuit of political optics. We aren't just watching a debate, we are watching the growing pains of a nation that is struggling to balance its global ambitions with a domestic population that simply wants to turn the page.